Paul appeals to Caesar. Paul appeals to Caesar. It's where we ended last time, where we saw a lot of things that were said against Paul, and he had to be given an opportunity to respond to all that was said about him. And when he was given an opportunity, he responded by saying that he was now appealing to Caesar. So let us consider verses 8 to verses 12 and consider these 4 verses very carefully. See what we can learn out of them. It says, Paul argued in his defense, neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar. If I have committed any offense, but Festus, wishing to do Jews a favor, say to Paul, do you wish to go up to Jerusalem and there be tried on these charges before me? Verses 10. But Paul said, I am standing before Caesar's tribunal, where I ought to be tried. To the Jews, I have done no wrong, as you yourself know very well. My dear ones, look at 11. And if then I am a wrongdoer, and have committed anything for which I deserve to die, I do not seek to escape death. But if there is nothing to their charges against me, no one can give me up to them. I appeal to Caesar. Then Festus, when he had conferred with his council, answered, to Caesar you have appealed, to Caesar shall you go. Those are the verses before us. And everything about these verses is all built upon that which we saw in the first exposition which we did last week. How actually Festus, upon his appointment, he came straight to Caesarea, which was the place of residence to all the Roman governors. But he didn't stay here for actually more than 3 days. We saw that he had to go to Jerusalem, and he went there for a reason of wanting to acquaint himself with the affairs of the nation. But immediately when he had gotten there, the Jews began their character assassination of Paul, speaking of all the bad things that Paul had done. And so Festus replied to them that the man was actually incarcerated in Caesarea, and if any of them wanted to actually bring any charge against the man, should follow with him in Caesarea and bring all their charges before the tribunal. Of which they did. They came and they said several things against Paul. But the last verse we saw in as far as chapter 25 verse 7, the verse made it very clear for us that when he had arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many and serious charges against him that they could not prove. So now let us begin by considering verses 1. Verses 1, which is actually to us is verses 8. Are we together? It says, Paul argued in his defense, neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar. The thing that is very clear, the response in verses 8 is in line with the charges that were brought against him. And Paul made it very clear how he had committed no offense, either against the law, against the temple, and against Caesar. That's the first thing you see. He denies it all. And he says he had not actually committed those 3 offenses that they had brought against him. So he wasn't willing that any person should incriminate him over things that he had not participated in. And we remember so very much well in Acts 24:12. It's the same thing that Paul made very clear. Paul said, they did not find me disputing with anyone or stirring up a crowd, either in the temple or in the synagogue or in the city. So the same charges here, like we saw in the early expositions we did in this book, that were brought on Stephen. These were the same thing that were brought on to even Paul. For even our Lord Jesus Christ, they also brought on him several charges that were indeed very similar. But the thing here that is also very important, that I need us to pay attention to, is his response to the 3rd charge. Do you see that statement where he says in verses 8 that null against Caesar? That was the one that was very serious. And so it is believed that the 3rd charge is what even Festus was very much interested in. If any proof was actually brought, Paul would have been counted as a person that had committed treason. Remember, the Jews were under the Roman rule. So contesting or actually defying against the Romans is the thing today. So treason, saying you are an enemy to the state. So this is the thing that Festus would have been so very much interested to know whether Paul had committed that charge or that crime. And so verses 9 comes in to say to us something here. That, but Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, say to Paul, do you wish to go up to Jerusalem and be tried there on these charges before me? Now what are you saying? The verse already explained. What has it explained? Festus wanting to gain favor with the Jews suggested something that the Jews would like. Remember, these guys had wanted to ambush Paul and kill him on the way. And because he was very deliberate in wanting to gain favor with them, so he makes a suggestion. Because as far as what the Jews had brought against Paul, they had no evidence. So now he makes a suggestion for them and sending it to Paul, saying, do you wish to be tried up in Jerusalem before me? So this is something that we also need to pay close attention to. That the way you see the tendency of actually Festus, it is not different from what actually Felix had done formerly. And it's why your verses 27 of chapter 24 says what it says. Unbelievers will always replay the same thing that other unbelievers have done in the past. Verses 27 says of Acts 24. When 2 years had elapsed, Felix was succeeded by Festus. And desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. So what actually Felix had done, wanting to gain favor with the Jews, is the same thing that a new governor also is looking for. The question is, why did actually Festus command Paul to go up to Jerusalem? Now listen to this. Because Festus, being a Roman governor, could not command Paul to go to Jerusalem because Paul was a Roman actually citizen. And so he could not force him. That's why he brought it as a suggestion. Do you wish? The man is a Roman citizen. You cannot force him to be judged by the Jews. Yet Caesar's tribunal has an individual that is sitting on it whose name is known as Festus. So since Paul could not be actually forced against his will, is why Festus says what he says. Do you wish to go to Jerusalem to be tried before me? Now a lesson for you and I to learn is this. Is that Festus also cared more at being popular with the Jews than actually exercising justice, even when he knew the right thing, which actually can also be very common with people today. That you forget your responsibility because you seek to be popular with many others. And that also comes to you and I today. That we always have to do that which is right, independent of how many are on our side. So now you consider the situation of Paul. One man against many. And so now Festus sides with the many, saying actually or suggesting something. But I love the response of Paul the Apostle. You look at your verses 10. What does it say in verses 10? It brings out a clarity that you could play around with some individuals who didn't know some particular important things. But these games, you could not play these games with Paul. Verse 10 says, but Paul said, listen to that, I am standing before Caesar's tribunal, where I ought to be tried. To the Jews, I have done wrong, as you yourself know very well. Do you know that people just choose to do that which is not right? From this verse here is what we are able to see. In the very words of Paul, Paul actually being inspired, he speaks the way he speaks. And he says, to the Jews I have done them no wrong, as you yourself know very well. The option was there for Festus to do that which was right, or to choose to be popular with the Jews. But from what we have seen here, Festus chose to be popular with the Jews. And so Paul's response simply just exposed Festus's conduct, his behavior, him being Caesar's representative, but proposing to hand Paul over to the Jews for a judgment which actually had no ground. So Paul says no. Caesar's tribunal is here. And there is a man who is actually on the throne here. Why should I be trade with the Jews to whom I have done no wrong? And so he refuses. And it's one big thing for us also to learn. We need to know our rights. People should not just squeeze us into doing wrong things, yet for sure we know we have not done anything wrong. We should not just accept another person's actually decision or an advice that is to incriminate us if we know we have not done anything wrong. Says, why should I go there? Caesar's tribunal is here, and it's where I ought to be tried. The man knew the law. You could not just squeeze him into actually things that were opposite to that which he knew. He says, why would you have to give me over to the Jews? Judgment. Yet I've done nothing wrong to the Jews. Now, verses 11 comes in also to say something here. In 11, it says, if then I am a wrongdoer. So upon his refusal, he also explains by saying this, for if then I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything for which I deserve to die, I do not seek to escape death. But if there is nothing wrong to their charges against me, no one can give me up to them. I appeal to Caesar. Now look at this one thing here. In fact, what you do see in verses 11 is an exposition of verses 10. Listen, not that he was afraid of death, but he wanted to die for a genuine reason. So he explains, me going to the Jews who are interested in killing me, it's not the main threat. The thing is, death is one big thing that I'm not scared about. I can even die if there is a reason for me to die. But again, he substantiates his statement by saying, but if there is nothing to their charges against me, no one can give me up to them. And so I appeal to Caesar. Now I just want also to make something very clear here. Listen to this. As far as the history about this thing about Caesar thing. It is believed that every Roman citizen had a right to appeal to Caesar himself. A right that was granted by law to all Romans in the provinces that were under the Roman rule as a way of protecting oneself against the unjust governors. Now, what has Paul identified? These governors are what? They are unjust. Caesar is always the last place. But since the governors themselves are not dealing with my issue with justice, I appeal to the final authority. And because indeed the man was a Roman citizen and he knew of these rights, he needed actually to protect himself from the unjust governors. But another thing that we should also not miss is this, that the providence of God is directing and ordering all old things. Paul has to take the gospel to Rome. He knows the law, but within him knowing the law, providence is also working in pushing the agenda of the Lord. The other thing is this: apart from the injustice of the governors that they made against Paul, Paul also, we know very much well, he had a desire to go to Rome. It's one of the things that we covered in chapter 19, verses 21. I remember we did that. Let me remind you a little bit. After these events, Paul resolved in the spirit to pass through Macedonia, through Achaia, and to go to Jerusalem, saying, after I have seen it there, I must also see Rome. So the desire was there. The gentleman wanted to get there. Remembering also chapter 23, verses 11, where the Lord himself said to him, you've done well in actually testifying about me in Jerusalem. I want you also to do the same for me in Rome. So all these things played some part in the decision of Paul. The injustice of the governors, and also his desire actually to go to Rome. But there was nothing that was outside that which is written. Now look at your verses 12 there. It says in verses 12, then Festus, when he had conferred with his council, answered, said, to Caesar you have appealed, to Caesar shall you go. Now what do you actually read out of that verse 12? A first observation is this: we should actually be very clear onto this notice that indeed Festus was not respecting actually Paul's response to be the way he made it. He thought he had done Paul a favor by saying, do you wish to go up to Jerusalem? But the response of Paul was unexpected response on the side of Festus. That's why verses 12 says, then Festus, when he had conferred with his council, meaning he first consulted those close to him about Paul's response. And now the response of Festus after he had conferred with his council says it all. When he said this, to Caesar you have appealed, to Caesar shall you go. In one way or the other, it is just like as if this guy was expressing an anger. To Caesar you shall go, since you don't think you can be helped by me. So in one way or the other, he was not happy, and with a lot of vigor and anger. It is just like saying you think you'll have it is on the side of Caesar. You go to Caesar and then we shall see how your case will end. And so that is how it went. But the thing about this that we need to learn, our learning, the injustice of these governors is just like the injustice we preachers tend to bring to people today. The thing is that the more We have falsehood all around us. And the more falsehood continues to abound, more we should also stand bold to oppose it. Or could not allow to be squeezed by the system. You opposed it by saying, I would rather go to Caesar, other than choosing to be a part of the system. And he says, you know what? There shall I go. So a lot of tremendous things that you can carry back home. First thing we saw, never should you accept charges that are not true. God who is righteous and holy sees all the things, he will actually vindicate you. The second thing is that we should not just accept any person's advice. They might be actually meaning well, but much as they might be meaning well, but they are misleading us in their meaning well. Better for us not to side with them, but do that which is right. And then another thing, be it which tribunal that you and I might actually ever stand before, or which man or woman, we should always be sober to make meaningful decisions that are to do with the spreading of the gospel. That's what you see Paul saying here, that because I have committed no charges against the Jews, not that I'm afraid of death, but the thing is this, I appeal to Caesar. So sometimes what might happen is us just simply appealing to God, because if you do not see justice all around, you just appeal to God and say, God, you're my defender. You may fail to get it and say, in your hands, Lord, I commit everything. That is the thing. So let us appreciate the Lord at least for some of the things that we have considered.